The iron cuffs around her wrists had drawn blood 3 days ago, and no one had bothered to clean the wounds. Sera Calloway stood barefoot on a wooden platform in the heart of the underground market, her tattered dress hanging off one shoulder, revealing bruises that bloomed purple and yellow across her collarbone. The room reeked of sweat, desperation, and something darker, something metallic that made her stomach turn. She'd stopped crying on the second day. Tears changed nothing here. Around her, voices shouted numbers in a language she was still learning to understand. The slave trade wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Not in 2026, not in the gleaming cities above where politicians smiled for cameras and promised equality. But beneath London, in caverns older than the city itself, different rules applied. Here, humans were currency. Here, the vampires reigned. Sera had been a university student 2 weeks ago. She'd had finals to study for, a part-time job at a bookshop, dreams of becoming a historian. Then she'd taken a wrong turn down an alley after her shift ended too late, and hands had grabbed her from behind. She'd woken in a cage. The auctioneer, a greasy man with tobacco-stained teeth, grabbed her chin roughly and turned her face toward the crowd. "Fresh blood, gentlemen. 22 years old, healthy, never been fed from. Virgin veins, I guarantee it." Sera wanted to spit in his face. She wanted to fight. But the collar around her neck would electrocute her if she tried. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. The crowd before her was a mixture of species, though vampires dominated. She could identify them easily now, the unnatural pallor of their skin, white as alabaster, the shock of platinum or silver hair that seemed to mark their kind, the way they moved with predatory grace. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and when they smiled, fangs glinted. £5,000, someone called from the back. 7,000, another voice countered. Sera's heart hammered. She'd heard what happened to humans bought for blood. They became living wine cellars, kept in luxury perhaps, but drained regularly. Their humanity slowly siphoned away until they were nothing but empty shells. 10,000, a woman's voice said, and Sera saw a vampire in a red dress lick her lips. Then the crowd parted. Sera felt the change before she saw him, a sudden hush. A collective intake of breath, the way even the other vampires stepped back instinctively. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. He walked through the crowd like a knife through silk, and Sera forgot how to breathe. The vampire who approached the platform was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block out the torchlight behind him. His hair fell to his shoulders in waves of pure white, and his skin held that same ethereal pallor, but on him it looked like marble come to life. He wore a black coat that brushed his calves, tailored perfectly to his frame, and beneath it a crimson shirt that made his pale skin seem to glow. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips that were surprisingly full, but his eyes captured her completely, deep crimson, like blood held up to firelight, ancient and intense and fixed entirely on her. "Who is that?" Sera whispered without meaning to. The auctioneer had gone pale, paler than usual. "My lord," he stammered, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched his knees. "We did not expect, that is, we were not informed you would—" "Silence." The vampire's voice was deep, accented with something old and Eastern European, and it carried absolute authority. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The single word cut through the room like a blade. He mounted the steps to the platform in one fluid movement, and suddenly he was standing before Sera, close enough that she could see the intricate pattern of his irises, smell the scent of him, something like winter air and old books and smoke. His eyes traveled over her face, then down to the shackles on her wrists, the collar on her neck, the bruises on her skin. Something dangerous flickered across his expression. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly, and somehow the quiet was more terrifying than any shout. Sera's mouth was dry. "I don't know. There were 3 of them. They grabbed me outside my work and I woke up here." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He turned to the auctioneer without taking his eyes off Sera. "Remove her restraints, now." "My lord, the policy states that—" "I did not ask about policy. Remove them, or I will remove your head from your shoulders." The auctioneer scrambled forward with shaking hands, fumbling with keys. The collar came off first, and Sera gasped as the weight disappeared from her neck. Then, the manacles fell away from her wrists, clattering to the wooden platform. The vampire caught her hands before she could lower them, his touch surprisingly gentle. He examined the raw wounds circling her wrists, his expression darkening further. "What is your name?" he asked. Sera Calloway." "Sera." He said it like he was tasting the word, rolling it around his mouth. "I am Aldric Corvinus. You know what I am? You're a vampire. Not merely a vampire." He released her hands and took a step back, his coat swirling around him. His voice rose, addressing the entire room. "I am Aldric Corvinus, king of the Northern Territories, lord of the Court of Eternal Night, descended from the First Blood, and I am claiming this woman under the law of kings." A collective gasp went through the crowd. The auctioneer went from pale to gray. "My lord, the law of kings hasn't been invoked in 3 centuries. "Then you should be honored to witness history." Aldric's tone was utterly cold. "Under the law of kings, I claim her life, her freedom, her safety as my sovereign responsibility. I claim her as mine. No one else may bid, no one else may touch her, and the price I pay will empty my personal vault if necessary." He turned back to Sera, and his voice softened marginally. "Do you understand what I am offering you? I'm not buying you as a slave. I'm claiming you under the oldest law my kind possesses, which means you become part of my household, under my protection. You will be safe. You will be free. No one will harm you again." Sera's mind reeled. "Why? You don't know me." Something flickered in those crimson eyes, something almost like pain. "Because no one should be in chains. Because I've lived 800 years and I am tired of seeing innocents suffer. Because when I walked in here and saw you standing there with blood on your wrists and fire still in your eyes, something in my chest that I thought had died centuries ago suddenly remembered how to beat." He extended his hand to her. "Come with me, Sera Calloway. I swear on my blood and my crown that I will protect you." She looked at his outstretched hand. Behind him, the crowd waited. The auctioneer looked like he might faint. Sera knew she had no real choice if she stayed here. Someone else would buy her, someone who wanted her only for her blood. But as she stared into Aldric's eyes, she realized that wasn't what made her decision. She believed him. She placed her hand in his, and his fingers closed around hers with a firmness that felt like an oath. "The price," the auctioneer managed weakly. "The law of kings requires, you will have your price." Aldric pulled a phone from his coat with his free hand, pressed a single button, and spoke in that same commanding tone. "Demetrius, empty Vault 7. Bring everything. Gold, jewels, currency, all of it. We're in the Southwark Caverns." He ended the call and turned back to the auctioneer. "The treasure will arrive within the hour. It will be more than enough to buy every slave in this miserable place 3 times over. Once I have taken Sera to safety, my people will return to complete the transaction. If she is harmed, touched, or threatened in any way before then, I will collapse these caverns on everyone inside them. Am I clear?" The auctioneer could only nod. Aldric swept his coat off his shoulders and wrapped it around Sera, engulfing her in fabric that smelled of him and held his warmth. Did vampires have warmth? He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. "Close your eyes," he murmured. "We're leaving." She barely had time to obey before the world lurched. Wind whipped past her face, and she felt the sensation of impossible speed, of movement faster than any car or train. She pressed her face into his shoulder and held on. When the movement stopped, Sera cautiously opened her eyes. They were no longer in the caverns. They stood in a massive entrance hall with floors of black marble and walls lined with oil paintings in gilded frames. A chandelier the size of a car hung overhead, dripping with crystals. Gothic arches soared above them, and through tall windows she could see the Thames glittering in the moonlight. "Welcome to Ravencourt," Aldric said, setting her carefully on her feet but keeping one arm around her waist to steady her. "My home. You are safe here." Sera's legs shook. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was fading, and the weight of the past 2 weeks crashed over her. She swayed, and Aldric caught her closer. "I've got you," he said quietly. "You're safe now, I promise." A door opened and a woman appeared, another vampire, with silver hair pulled into an elegant knot and wearing a crisp black suit. Her eyes widened when she saw Sera. "My lord? What?" "This is Sera Calloway. She is under my protection and is to be given the rose suite. Have Elena draw a bath, bring medical supplies for her wounds, and find clothes that will fit her. Also food, human food. When was the last time you ate?" This last question was directed to Sera. "Yesterday morning, I think." Time had blurred in the cage. Aldric's expression went thunderous again, and the woman in the suit stepped forward quickly. "Of course, my lord. Right away. Miss Calloway, if you'll come with me?" Sera looked up at Aldric. Now that she was standing in proper light, she could see the details of his face more clearly, the almost inhuman perfection of his features, but also the weariness in his eyes, the weight of centuries. "You're really not going to hurt me?" He raised his hand and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light. "I would burn the world before I let anyone hurt you again. That is my vow." Something in her chest tightened, and she nodded. She let the woman who introduced herself as Victoria, Aldric's chamberlain, lead her away through corridors lined with art and antiques, up a grand staircase to a suite of rooms that looked like they belonged in a palace. The rose suite was named for the climbing roses carved into the woodwork, their vines winding up the bedposts and across the ceiling. The bathroom was larger than Sera's entire flat had been, with a tub that could fit 3 people and was already filling with steaming water that smelled of lavender. Another vampire appeared, younger looking than Victoria, with kind eyes. "I'm Elena," she said softly. "I'm going to help you bathe and tend your wounds, if that's all right." Sera nodded numbly. She let Elena help her out of the ruined dress, too exhausted to feel embarrassed. The hot water stung her cuts at first, then soothed them. Elena worked quietly, washing the grime from Sera's skin and hair, treating the wounds on her wrists and neck with antiseptic and bandages. By the time Sera was clean and dressed in a soft nightgown that actually fit, food had arrived, a tray laden with soup, bread, cheese, fruit, and tea. She ate mechanically at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered what real food tasted like. Victoria reappeared. "Lord Aldric asks if you're well enough to speak with him, or if you'd prefer to rest. He says the choice is entirely yours." Sera set down her teacup. Her mind was spinning with questions, and she knew she wouldn't be able to sleep until she had at least some answers. "I'll speak with him." Victoria led her to a library that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with books lined 3 walls, and the 4th was dominated by a fireplace tall enough to walk into. Aldric stood before the fire, still wearing the crimson shirt but having discarded his coat. He turned when they entered. "Thank you, Victoria. That will be all." Victoria bowed and left, closing the door behind her. Aldric gestured to a pair of leather armchairs near the fire. "Please, sit. How are you feeling?" "Like I'm dreaming," Sera admitted, sinking into the chair. The leather was butter-soft and warm from the fire. "A few hours ago I was in chains, and now I'm in a palace with the Vampire King." "Not the Vampire King. A Vampire King. There are several of us ruling different territories. I control the northern territories, England, Scotland, Ireland, and parts of Scandinavia." He sat in the opposite chair, his movements fluid and controlled. "But titles aside, you deserve an explanation. You deserve answers. You said you invoked the law of kings. What does that actually mean?" Aldric leaned back, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "It's an ancient law, created when my kind first organized into courts and kingdoms. It allows a vampire monarch to claim a human under their direct protection, making that human part of the royal household. Once claimed, that human cannot be harmed, bought, sold, or turned without their explicit consent. It's meant to be used sparingly, only in cases where the monarch believes a grave injustice has occurred." "And you think what happened to me was a grave injustice?" His eyes met hers, intense and burning. "I think the fact that slave markets still exist in my territory is a grave injustice. I have spent the last century trying to shut them down, but they operate in shadows, and my enemies shield them because enslaved humans are profitable." His hands tightened on the armrests. "I have laws, Sera. Strict laws about human-vampire interactions. Humans are to be treated as equals. Feeding requires consent. Trafficking is punishable by death. But enforcement is difficult when there are those who profit from breaking those laws. You've been trying to stop it? For longer than you've been alive. He ran a hand through his white hair, and for a moment he looked tired, impossibly tired. When I took the throne 400 years ago, things were worse. Humans were chattel, nothing more. I changed the laws. I made alliances with human governments. I executed vampires who refused to follow the new order, and things improved, but they did not end. Tonight, I heard rumors of a new market. I went to see for myself, to gather evidence, to identify who was running it so I could dismantle the operation. His voice dropped. And then I saw you. What happens now? Now, several things. First, you heal. You rest. You regain your strength. This is your home for as long as you need it. Second, I will destroy everyone involved in your abduction and imprisonment. That is not negotiable. Third, when you are ready, we discuss your future, what you want, where you want to go, what you need to feel safe again. Sera studied him. In the firelight, he looked like something from a painting too beautiful to be real, carved from ice and moonlight. But there was nothing cold about the way he looked at her, nothing frozen in the intensity of his gaze. "Why did you really do this?" she asked quietly. "You said something in the cavern about your chest remembering how to beat. What did you mean?" Aldric was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it yet. 800 years is a long time to live, Sera. Long enough to watch everyone you love grow old and die. Long enough to become numb to almost everything. I have been king for 4 centuries, and every day is politics and power struggles and making decisions that affect thousands of lives. I do my duty, I uphold my laws, but I do not feel much anymore. I haven't in a very long time. He turned to look at her. And then I walked into that market and saw you standing there with blood on your wrists and fury in your eyes, refusing to break even though they'd tried to crush you. Something shifted. Something woke up. I looked at you and I felt anger, real anger. Not the cold calculation I usually employ. I felt protective. I felt something. And I realized I would do anything to get you out of that place, anything at all. Sera's heart was pounding. You don't even know me. No, I don't, and perhaps that makes me a fool. But I have learned to trust my instincts, and every instinct I possess is telling me that you matter, that this matters. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I am not asking anything of you, Sera. I am not demanding your affection or your gratitude. I simply want you to be safe and free. Whatever else happens, that is up to you. She wanted to say something, but her throat was tight and her eyes were burning. She'd been so strong for so long, refusing to cry in front of her captors, refusing to give them the satisfaction. But sitting here in this warm library with this impossible vampire who'd emptied his vault to save her, the dam finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks and she covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. A moment later, she felt Aldric's presence beside her, kneeling in front of her chair. His hands gently pulled hers away from her face. "You're safe now," he murmured. "You can let it out. You're safe." She broke. Great. Heaving sobs tore from her chest, releasing 2 weeks of terror and pain and helplessness. Aldric pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried into his shoulder. His hand stroked her hair, and he murmured things in a language she didn't understand, the words sounding like comfort, even though she couldn't translate them. When the storm finally passed, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I got your shirt wet." He actually smiled a small, genuine smile that transformed his face. "I have others. Feel better?" "A little. A lot, actually." She wiped her eyes. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There is no debt. Remember that." He stood, offering her his hand. "You should rest. Tomorrow we can talk more. For tonight, just know that you are safe, and no one will hurt you here." She let him walk her back to the rose suite. At the door, she turned. "Aldric? Yes? I'm glad you walked into that market tonight. I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't." His expression was unreadable, but his eyes softened. "Fate works in strange ways. Sleep well, Sera." She watched him walk away down the corridor, his white hair gleaming in the lamplight, before she closed the door and climbed into the enormous bed. Despite everything, she fell asleep within minutes, her body finally allowing itself to rest now that it believed she was truly safe. She woke to sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Then memory returned, and she sat up, looking around the beautiful room. A clock on the mantel showed 10 in the morning. A soft knock came at the door, and Elena entered with a tray. "Good morning, Miss Calloway. I brought breakfast. How are you feeling?" "Better, much better." Sera was surprised to find it was true. Her body ached, but the bone-deep exhaustion had eased. "Is Aldric awake?" "Lord Aldric doesn't sleep during the day. He's older and more powerful than most vampires, so sunlight doesn't affect him as strongly, though he still prefers to avoid it. He's in his study. He asked me to tell you that you're welcome to explore the house and grounds as you wish, and that he'd like to speak with you this afternoon if you're feeling up to it." Sera spent the morning doing exactly that exploring. Ravencourt was enormous, a Gothic mansion built on the banks of the Thames, hidden behind high walls and old magic that kept humans from noticing it. Victoria explained that it had been Aldric's primary residence for 300 years. The house was a maze of interconnected rooms, each more opulent than the last. There was a ballroom with crystal chandeliers, a dining hall with a table that could seat 50, a music room with instruments from every era, and at least 3 more libraries. The art collection alone could have filled a museum, but what struck Sera most was how lived-in it all felt. This wasn't a showplace or a museum. Books were pulled out and left open. Sheet music sat on the piano. There were fresh flowers in vases and throw blankets draped over chairs. People lived here, both vampires and humans, she discovered. At least 20 staff members called Ravencourt home, and they treated each other with easy familiarity. In the afternoon, Victoria found her in one of the gardens. "Lord Aldric is ready to see you if you're available." Sera followed her to a study on the second floor. Aldric sat behind a massive desk covered in papers and ledgers, his white hair tied back, wearing a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked like he'd been working for hours. "Sera, come in, please." He gestured to a chair across from him and set down his pen. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks, thank you." She sat, folding her hands in her lap. "Elena said you wanted to talk?" "I have news. Not all of it good." His expression was grim. "My people raided the slave market last night after we left. We freed all the humans who were being held, 17 in total. They're being cared for, and we'll help them return to their lives. We also captured several of the traffickers." "That's good news." "Yes, but in questioning them, we learned that your abduction was not random." Sera's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Aldric pulled out a file and slid it across the desk. Inside were photographs of her, leaving her flat, walking to work, sitting in the university library. Someone had been following her. "You were targeted," Aldric said quietly. "Specifically chosen. One of my enemies, a vampire lord named Constantine Draven, has been looking for ways to undermine me. He learned that I've been searching for slave markets, and he decided to create an opportunity. He would set up a new market and arrange for a specific human to be taken, one whose disappearance might draw attention, might create a scandal if handled wrong. A university student with no family, no one to immediately miss her, but enough of a life that questions would be asked eventually." Sera felt sick. "I was bait?" "In a way. He was hoping I would find the market, see the injustice, and act rashly, perhaps kill the wrong people, or cause a scene that would let him paint me as unstable. What he did not anticipate was the law of kings, or that I would empty my vault without hesitation." Aldric's eyes flashed crimson. "He also did not anticipate how angry I would be when I learned you were hurt as part of his political game. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call a conclave of kings. Constantine will be summoned to answer for his crimes: human trafficking, conspiracy to undermine another king's authority, and endangering the masquerade. If he's found guilty, the sentence is death." "The masquerade?" "The agreement between our kind and humanity. Humans know we exist, but we maintain a careful balance. We don't flaunt our power. We follow human laws where they don't conflict with our own, and we keep the worst of our nature in check. Constantine's actions risk exposing the parts of vampire society that would terrify humans and restart the wars we ended centuries ago." Aldric stood and walked to the window, looking out over the grounds. "The conclave will convene in 3 days. It will be held here, at Ravencourt. Kings and queens from across Europe will attend. It will be dangerous, contentious, and political. Sera stood as well. Where do I fit in this? He turned to face her. That is your choice. You can remain here under my protection, hidden away where Constantine cannot use you as a pawn again. Or you can stand before the conclave and testify to what was done to you. Your voice, your story, it would carry enormous weight, but I will not ask that of you. You've been through enough. Sera walked to the window and stood beside him, looking out at the gardens. The roses were in bloom, red and white and pink, climbing up trellises and spilling over walls. She thought about the cage, the chains, the feeling of helplessness. I'll testify, she said. Aldric looked at her, surprise flickering across his features. Sera. No, I want to. You said Constantine hurt me to play political games. Then let me show every vampire king and queen in Europe what those games actually look like. Let them see the bruises. Let them hear what it's like to be hunted and caged. Maybe if they see it, really see it, they'll think twice before allowing it to continue. Something like admiration shone in Aldric's eyes. You are braver than you know. I'm angry. There's a difference. He laughed, a genuine surprised sound that made him look younger. Anger can be a powerful tool. Very well. If you're certain, I will arrange for you to address the conclave. But until then, I need you to stay close. Constantine will learn that his plot failed, and he may try again. I am assigning guards to you. You think he'd try to hurt me again? I think he's desperate and foolish, which makes him dangerous. I won't take chances with your safety. Aldric's expression softened. There is one other thing. The law of kings requires that you stay under my protection until the conclave officially recognizes the claim. After that, you're free to leave, to return to your life, to do whatever you wish. But until then, you're bound to Ravencourt. I have nowhere else to go, Sera said quietly. My flat was a rental. I haven't paid rent in 2 weeks, so I've probably been evicted. My job is certainly gone. My university enrollment... She trailed off, the weight of what she'd lost hitting her. We'll sort it out, Aldric said firmly. All of it. Your enrollment can be reinstated. I have connections at the university. Your belongings from your flat can be recovered. As for your job, well, I suspect you won't need it anymore. What do you mean? The law of kings also entitles you to compensation from the royal treasury. You were harmed because of vampire politics, which makes you eligible for reparations. The amount is substantial enough to complete your education without working, enough to start over wherever you wish. He paused. Though I hope you'll choose to stay at Ravencourt, at least for a while. I find your company refreshing. Sera felt heat rise to her cheeks. In the afternoon light streaming through the window, Aldric was impossibly beautiful, his white hair almost glowing, his features perfect in a way that didn't seem quite real. But it was his eyes that held her crimson and ancient, but warm when they looked at her. I don't know anything about vampire politics or royal courts, she said. Neither did I, once. I was a soldier before I was a king, turned during a battle I should not have survived. I learned. He tilted his head, studying her. You're a historian, yes? You understand how power works, how societies rise and fall. You'd adapt quickly. You want me to stay permanently? I want you to have a choice, real choice, not the illusion of it. He turned to face her fully. But I will admit, selfishly, that I hope you choose to stay. Ravencourt is a better place with you in it. Before Sera could respond, a knock interrupted them. Victoria entered, bowing. My lord, forgive the intrusion, but there's a situation. Lady Morgana has arrived and is demanding an audience. Aldric's expression went carefully neutral. Did she say why? She said it concerns the matter of the human under your protection. He exchanged a glance with Sera. It begins already. Very well. Show her to the formal receiving room, and Victoria have Theron and Cassian stand ready. If Morgana has brought trouble, I want to be prepared. Victoria bowed again and left. Aldric turned to Sera. Lady Morgana is the vampire queen of the Western Territories. France, Spain, Portugal. She and I have an alliance, but it's often strained. She'll have heard about the law of kings by now, and she'll want to see you for herself. Are you comfortable being present for this meeting? Sera lifted her chin. If she's here about me, I should be there. Pride flickered across Aldric's face. Stay close to me. Let me do most of the talking. Morgana is old, powerful, and cunning. She'll try to read you, to assess whether you're worth the political capital I've spent on you." They walked together to the receiving room, a grand chamber with vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows depicting vampire history. A woman waited there, and Sera's breath caught. Lady Morgana was stunning in the way a winter storm was stunning, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Her hair fell in waves of pure white to her waist, and she wore a gown of midnight blue that looked like liquid silk. Her skin had that same alabaster pallor, and her eyes were a deep violet that seemed to see through to your bones. She looked no older than 30, but power radiated from her like heat from a furnace. "Aldric," her voice was honey over steel, accented with French. "How dramatic of you. The law of kings? Really?" "Morgana." Aldric inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect between equals but not subservience. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "You invoke an ancient law that hasn't been used in centuries. You empty your personal vault in the process, and you don't expect your fellow monarchs to take an interest?" Morgana's gaze slid to Sera, and those violet eyes narrowed. "So this is the human who caused such a stir." Sera fought the urge to step back. Instead, she met Morgana's gaze as steadily as she could. "My name is Sera Calloway." "Bold. I see why he likes you." Morgana circled them slowly, her movements liquid and predatory. "Tell me, Miss Calloway, what happened to you? And don't leave anything out. I want the truth." Sera glanced at Aldric, who nodded slightly. So she told the story, the abduction, the cage, the market, the chains. She kept her voice steady, refusing to let it shake even when describing the worst parts. Morgana listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When Sera finished, Morgana was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Aldric. "Constantine?" "We believe so. I have evidence I'll present at the conclave." "He's a fool. Trafficking humans to score political points against you?" Morgana shook her head. "He's gone too far this time. I'll support your call for judgment." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I didn't come here out of altruism." Morgana's gaze returned to Sera. "The law of kings creates complications. If Aldric has claimed you, you become a political entity, part of his household, entitled to his protection, but also a potential vulnerability. His enemies will see you as a target. His allies will wonder if his judgment has been compromised by sentiment." "My judgment is sound," Aldric said coolly, "and Sera is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her threatens me directly." "Precisely my point. You've made her safety a matter of royal honor." Morgana moved closer to Sera, studying her face. "Can you handle that, child? Can you bear the weight of being precious to a king? Because it's not a small thing. People will try to use you, to manipulate you, to hurt you in order to hurt him. Your life will never be simple again." Sera thought about that. Thought about her old life, her little flat, her quiet job, her predictable routine. That life was gone, whether she wanted it or not. The moment she'd been taken, it had ended. "I didn't choose any of this," she said quietly. "But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I won't be used as a pawn anymore, not by Constantine, not by anyone. If being under Aldric's protection means I have to be strong enough to face political games, then I'll learn to be that strong." Morgana's lips curved into a small smile. "Oh, Aldric, you've chosen well. She has spine." She stepped back. "Very well, I'll attend your conclave and I'll support your judgment against Constantine. But know this, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because the trafficking has to end. It's making all of us look like monsters, and I rather enjoy the truce we've built with humanity. I have no desire to return to the days of pitchforks and stakes. Your reasons are your own. I appreciate the support regardless." Morgana swept toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. Protect her, Aldric. Truly protect her. Because if something happens to her after you've made such a public claim, you'll look weak, and weakness in a king invites challenges." Her violet eyes glittered. "And I quite like our current political arrangement. I'd hate to see you lose your throne over a human girl, no matter how intriguing she is." With that, she was gone in a swirl of silk and the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine. Aldric let out a breath. "Well, that went better than I expected." She's terrifying. She's survived 2,000 years by being terrifying, but she's also honorable in her own way. If she says she'll support us, she will. He turned to Sera. You handled that admirably. Morgana respects strength, and you showed her plenty. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding myself together. That's what strength is sometimes, holding yourself together when everything is falling apart. He reached out and gently took her hand. Come. I think we've both earned a break from politics for a few hours. Let me show you something. He led her through the house to a part she hadn't explored yet. A conservatory filled with plants and flowers, with a glass ceiling that let in the afternoon sun. In the center was a fountain, and around it, comfortable chairs and a table laden with tea and pastries. I come here when the politics become too much, Aldric explained. The sunlight is weakened by the glass so it doesn't burn me, and the sound of the water helps me think. They sat together, and for a while they just existed in comfortable silence. Sera sipped tea and watched the light play across the water. Aldric seemed content to simply be near her, not demanding conversation. Finally, Sera spoke. Can I ask you something personal? Always. You said you were turned during a battle. When was that? What was your life like before you became a vampire? Aldric leaned back, his eyes distant with memory. It was 1226. I was a soldier in the retinue of a minor noble in what's now Romania. We were fighting against an invasion humans, or so we thought. But our enemies had allied with vampires, using them as weapons. During the final battle, I was wounded badly. I should have died on that field. But a vampire turned you instead. Her name was Alara. She was ancient even then, and she found me dying in the mud. She said I had the soul of a king, and she could not let it go to waste. So she gave me her blood, and I woke 3 days later as one of the undead. His expression softened. She taught me everything: how to control the bloodlust, how to use my new strength, how to navigate vampire society. She was my sire, my mentor, my closest friend for 3 centuries. What happened to her? She walked into the sun one day, deliberately. She said she was tired, that she'd lived long enough. Pain flickered across his face. I found her letter afterward. She told me I was ready to lead, that I had the strength and the wisdom to change our world for the better. She made me promise to try. And you became king. Not right away. First I was a soldier, then a lord, then a prince. I earned my throne the hard way, through battle and politics and alliances. When I finally took the crown, I swore I would honor Alara's memory by making the vampire world something she could have been proud of. He looked at Sera. That's why I can't tolerate the slave trade, the casual cruelty, the disregard for human life. Alara taught me that immortality should make us more compassionate, not less. That power should be used to protect, not to dominate. Sera reached across and placed her hand over his. She would be proud of you. His fingers curled around hers, and for a moment his carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. I hope so. Some days I'm not sure. They stayed there in the conservatory as the afternoon faded to evening, talking about everything and nothing. Aldric told her stories of the centuries he'd lived, of empires that had risen and fallen, of human friends he'd loved and lost. Sera told him about her childhood, her dreams of becoming a historian, her fascination with the past. At some point, the conversation turned to lighter things, and Sera found herself laughing at Aldric's dry observations about various historical figures. You're telling me that Lord Byron was actually that dramatic? It wasn't just his poetry? He was worse in person. I met him once at a party in Venice. He spent the entire evening reciting his own work and swooning over a countess who clearly wanted nothing to do with him. Aldric's lips quirked. Though I will say, the man could write, even if he was insufferable about it. I can't believe you've met so many famous people. It must be incredible, watching history unfold firsthand. It has its moments, though more often, history is tedious meetings and paperwork. The exciting bits are rarer than you'd think. He tilted his head, studying her in the fading light. You would have made an excellent historian. You know, you ask good questions, you listen, you see patterns. I still could be. You said my university enrollment could be reinstated. It can. Will you want to return, after everything? Sera thought about that. I don't know. My life before seems so small now, like it belonged to a different person. But I did love learning. I loved research, piecing together stories from fragments of evidence. She met his eyes. Maybe I could study vampire history instead. Learn about your world from the inside. Aldric's expression shifted into something intense, almost hungry. You would trust me to teach you, to share the secrets of my kind? You trusted me enough to empty your vault for me. The least I can do is trust you back. Something passed between them in that moment, something electric and significant. Aldric leaned closer, his crimson eyes locked on hers. Sera! A loud crash interrupted them. Victoria burst into the conservatory, her usual composure shattered. My lord, we're under attack! Aldric was on his feet instantly, all softness gone, replaced by the hard edges of a warrior king. How many? Where? At least a dozen vampires breached the east wall. They're fighting through the guards. They're heading for the main house. Constantine? Aldric's voice was pure ice. He's moved faster than I anticipated. Victoria, sound the full alarm. Get every human in the house to the safe rooms. Seal them behind silver and iron. Now! Victoria ran. Aldric turned to Sera and gripped her shoulders. Listen to me carefully. You need to go with Victoria. The safe rooms are warded. No vampire can enter them without permission. You'll be protected there. What about you? I'm going to end this. His eyes blazed crimson. Constantine has violated the sanctity of a royal house. He's broken every law we have. This gives me the right to kill him and anyone who fights for him. Aldric, be careful. He silenced her by pulling her close and pressing a kiss to her forehead, brief and fierce. I will come back to you. I swear it. Then he was gone, moving with that impossible vampire speed, leaving Sera standing alone in the conservatory as the sounds of battle echoed through Ravencourt. Victoria reappeared and grabbed Sera's hand. Miss Calloway, please, we need to go. Sera let herself be pulled through the house, along with several other human staff members, all being herded toward the lower levels. They passed windows, and through them, Sera caught glimpses of the fight vampires moving like blurs, impossibly fast, crashing into each other with forces that shattered stone. And in the center of it all, Aldric. He'd removed his shirt, revealing a muscular torso covered in scars that shouldn't exist on a vampire, but somehow did. His eyes blazed like coals, and when he fought, he was terrifyingly beautiful, all lethal grace and contained fury. He moved through Constantine's forces like a scythe, through wheat, each movement precise and devastating. Then, Sera was being pushed into a room deep underground, reinforced with metal and covered in symbols she didn't recognize. Victoria sealed the door behind them with a heavy bar. We're safe here, Victoria said, though her voice shook. These walls have protected us before. They'll protect us again. Sera sank onto a bench, her heart hammering. Around her, the other humans huddled together, frightened but trusting in the wards. Time crawled. Above them, muffled sounds continued, crashes, roars, things that made the ceiling shake. It felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes before the sound stopped. Silence fell, heavy and ominous. Victoria stood by the door, her ear pressed to it. I can't hear anything. Is that good or bad? Someone whispered. Before Victoria could answer, a voice called through the door. Victoria, it's Theron. The threat is neutralized. Open up. Victoria hesitated, then spoke a word in a language Sera didn't know. The symbols on the door glowed briefly, then faded. She lifted the bar and cracked the door open. Theron stood there, one of Aldric's guards, a tall vampire with silver hair pulled into a braid. He had blood on his clothes, but seemed uninjured. Everyone all right in there? We're fine. Lord Aldric? Alive. He's upstairs dealing with the aftermath. He asked me to bring Miss Calloway to him once I confirmed everyone was safe. Sera stepped forward before Victoria could protest. Take me to him. Theron led her back up through the house. The damage was extensive broken furniture, shattered windows, scorch marks on walls and floors. But the household staff was already at work, cleaning and repairing with the efficiency of people who'd done this before. They found Aldric in the entrance hall. He'd cleaned the blood off his hands and face and put on a fresh shirt, though Sera could see bruises already fading on his neck and arms, vampire healing in action. He was speaking with several other vampires, giving orders in that authoritative tone that brooked no argument. When he saw Sera, relief flashed across his face. He dismissed the others with a wave and crossed to her, looking her over carefully. "You're unharmed?" "I'm fine." The safe room worked exactly as promised. She reached up and touched the bruise on his jaw gently. "What about you?" "I'll heal. I always do." He caught her hand and held it against his chest. Constantine was even more foolish than I thought. He led the attack himself, thinking he could kill me in my own home and claim he was defending himself against my aggression. He failed. Where is he now? In my dungeons, along with what's left of his followers. The ones who survived, anyway. Aldric's expression was grim. He'll stand trial at the conclave as planned, but now he's also facing charges of assaulting a reigning monarch. The penalty for that is absolute. There's no possible outcome where he walks away. Sera looked around at the damage. "Is everyone all right? Your people?" "3 guards were injured, but they'll recover. No fatalities on our side. On Constantine's side." He shook his head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're safe, that everyone is safe." He looked exhausted, Sera realized. Not physically, vampire endurance was apparently significant, but emotionally. The weight of command, of protecting everyone under his roof, of making life and death decisions pressed down on him visibly. "Come on," she said quietly, tugging on his hand. "You need to rest. I have things to attend to. They can wait an hour. You just fought off an attack. Let someone else handle the cleanup for a bit." She led him back toward his private quarters, and surprisingly, he let her. Victoria shot her a grateful look as they passed. Aldric's rooms were even more opulent than the Rose Suite, done in blacks and deep reds and golds. Sera pushed him gently onto a leather sofa and sat beside him. "Talk to me. How are you really?" He leaned back, closing his eyes. "Angry. Tired. Grateful that you're safe." Constantine was willing to risk everything, his position, his life, the lives of his followers, all to try to undermine me. That kind of desperation is dangerous. "Why does he hate you so much?" "Because I took something he wanted. 300 years ago, when the previous king of the Northern Territories died, there were several claimants to the throne. I was one. Constantine was another. We fought politically at first, then literally. I won. He never forgave me." Aldric opened his eyes and looked at her. "He spent centuries trying to find ways to damage my reputation, to weaken my position. Taking you, creating that market, trying to force my hand, it was all part of that. And tonight's attack was his final gamble. What will happen to him now?" "The conclave will judge him. With the evidence, we have the testimony of the traffickers we captured, your testimony, and now his assault on Ravencourt. There's only one possible verdict. Execution." Sera should have felt something about that, horror, perhaps, or guilt, but she thought about the cage, the chains, the casual way the auctioneer had handled her like property. She thought about the other humans who'd been taken, whose lives had been destroyed by Constantine's political games. "Good," she said simply. Aldric looked at her, surprise flickering across his features. Then, something like respect. "You continue to surprise me, Sera Calloway. What did you expect? That I'd beg for mercy on his behalf?" "Some would. Many would, in fact. Humans often have a gentler sense of justice than my kind." "Maybe most humans. But I was the one in chains. I was the one who felt helpless and terrified. If he'd succeeded tonight, if he'd killed you, what do you think would have happened to me?" She met his eyes. "Justice isn't always gentle. Sometimes it has to be absolute." Aldric reached out and cupped her face with one hand, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew he possessed. "You are extraordinary," he murmured. "Do you know that?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. They were close, she realized. Close enough that she could see the flecks of darker red in his eyes, could count his eyelashes, could feel his breath on her face, even though vampires didn't really need to breathe. "Aldric," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. "I know. I feel it too." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "From the moment I saw you in that market, something changed. I told myself it was just protective instinct, just anger at the injustice. But it's more than that. You've awakened something in me I thought was long dead." "What is it?" "Hope, longing, the desire to be more than just a king, more than just duty and obligation." His eyes searched hers. When I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want something for myself, not for my kingdom or my people, but just for me. I want to hear you laugh. I want to know every thought in your head. I want to keep you safe, not because the law demands it, but because the thought of anything happening to you is unbearable. Sera's breath caught. I was terrified of you at first. You were so powerful, so otherworldly. But the more time I spend with you, the more I see past the king to the person underneath. You're kind, Aldric, and lonely. And you carry so much weight that no one else can see. You see it? Because I'm looking. She leaned closer, closing the distance between them. And because I feel it too, this pull, this connection. I don't know if it's because you saved me, or if it's something deeper, but I know that when I'm with you I feel safe and seen, and like maybe there's a future ahead of me that's more than just surviving. Sera. Her name was a prayer on his lips. I am 800 years old. I have lived through empires and wars. I have loved before and lost everything. I swore I would never let myself feel this way again, because the pain of loss is too great. But you make me want to risk it. You make me want to try. Then try, she whispered. Take the risk. Let yourself feel this. He kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might break. His lips were cool but not cold, gentle but firm. Sera's eyes fluttered closed, and she leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel the solidity of him, the strength contained in that controlled form. Aldric made a low sound in his throat and deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair, the other wrapping around her waist to pull her closer. Sera forgot how to breathe, forgot everything except the sensation of his mouth on hers, the way he held her like she was precious beyond measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, or in Aldric's case pretending to be, he rested his forehead against hers. I have waited 800 years for you, he murmured. I didn't know I was waiting, but I was. For you. For this. For the way you make me feel alive again. Sera smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. Then I'm glad you found me. Even if the circumstances were terrible, even if it was painful and frightening, I'm glad our paths crossed. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the rest of the world forgotten. Eventually, reality intruded. There were preparations to make for the conclave, security to arrange, 100 details to attend to. But that night, as Sera fell asleep in the rose suite, she did so with the memory of Aldric's kiss warming her from the inside out, and the knowledge that she'd found something rare and precious, a love that crossed the boundaries between human and vampire, mortal and immortal, present and past. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Vampires arrived from across Europe, kings and queens, princes and duchesses, ancient powers in expensive clothes. Ravencourt filled with the supernatural elite, and the political tension was thick enough to cut. Aldric was in his element, playing the role of host and king with practiced ease. But whenever he had a spare moment, he found Sera, stealing kisses in empty corridors, holding her hand beneath the table at formal dinners, looking at her with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world. Morgana arrived with her entourage and cornered Sera in the library. So, you and Aldric? Sera refused to be embarrassed. Yes, me and Aldric. Bold, dangerous, the other monarchs will use it against him, you know. They'll say he's been compromised by human sentiment. Let them say what they want. Aldric and I know what this is. Morgana studied her for a long moment, then laughed a rich, genuine sound. You're perfect for him. You have steel in your spine and fire in your blood. Don't let anyone dim that. She leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, I think it's about time Aldric found something someone to care about beyond duty. He's been a rather grim king for the past few centuries. You're good for him. The night before the conclave, Aldric took Sera to the roof of Ravencourt. The city sprawled below them, London's lights glittering like stars. The moon hung fat and full overhead. Tomorrow, everything changes, Aldric said quietly. Constantine will be judged. Your testimony will be heard. The law will be satisfied. And after? After, you're free. The law of kings will be fulfilled. You can go wherever you want, be whoever you want. You'll have resources, protection, but no obligation to remain at Ravencourt." Sera turned to look at him. In the moonlight, he was ethereally beautiful, his white hair silver, his skin luminous. But it was his eyes that held her vulnerable, uncertain, hopeful. "What do you want?" she asked softly. "I want you to stay. I want to court you properly, spend time learning everything about you, show you my world, and learn about yours. I want to see if this feeling between us can grow into something permanent." He took her hands. "But I won't trap you, Sera. You need to choose freely without obligation or coercion. If you want to leave, to return to your old life or start a new one elsewhere, I'll help you. I'll make sure you're safe and provided for, and I'll let you go, even though it will hurt." Sera squeezed his hands. "I don't want my old life. That girl who worked in a bookshop and studied history, she's gone. I'm different now, stronger, angrier, more alive." She smiled. "And I don't want to leave Ravencourt. I want to stay here with you, learn about vampire society, maybe even help you change it for the better. I want to see where this goes." The relief that flooded Aldric's face was profound. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for choosing this, for choosing me." "Always," she promised. They stood there under the stars, wrapped in each other, until dawn threatened the horizon and they had to retreat inside. The conclave convened at sunset the next day. The ballroom had been transformed into a court chamber, with thrones arranged in a semicircle and space in the center for the accused. Every vampire in the room was ancient and powerful, their presence like pressure against Sera's skin. She sat in a place of honor beside Aldric's throne, wearing a dress of midnight blue that Victoria had procured, elegant but simple, designed to make her look dignified rather than trying to compete with vampire glamour. Constantine was brought in chains of silver that burned his skin where they touched. He looked defiant despite his captivity, his dark hair wild, his eyes full of rage. When he saw Sera, hatred twisted his features. The trial proceeded with formal precision. Evidence was presented, testimony from the captured traffickers, financial records showing Constantine's involvement, documentation of the attack on Ravencourt. Each piece built an insurmountable case. Finally, it was Sera's turn to speak. She stood and walked to the center of the room, very aware that every vampire present was watching her with predatory focus. But she lifted her chin and spoke clearly. "My name is Sera Calloway. 3 weeks ago I was a university student with a normal life. Then I was abducted on the order of Constantine Draven, held in a cage, and sold at a slave market, all so he could play political games with King Aldric." She described everything: the fear, the pain, the helplessness, the moment when Aldric had walked in and changed everything. She showed her wrists, the scars still visible from the manacles. She looked directly at Constantine as she spoke. "You treated me like an object, like something to be used and discarded. You didn't care that I had dreams, hopes, people who would miss me. You didn't care that I was a person at all. To you, I was just a pawn." Her voice hardened. "But I'm not a pawn. I'm a human being. And what you did wasn't just a crime against King Aldric, it was a crime against me, against humanity, against everything the masquerade is supposed to protect." She turned to address the assembled vampires. "You have a choice. You can allow people like Constantine to continue operating, treating humans as property, and risk restarting the wars that nearly destroyed both our species. Or you can say, here and now, that this ends. That humans are people, entitled to the same dignity and protection as vampires, that anyone who violates that will face absolute consequences." Silence fell when she finished. Sera walked back to her seat beside Aldric, who looked at her with undisguised pride. Morgana stood, her violet eyes flashing. "The girl speaks truth. Constantine's actions threaten the peace we've built. I vote for execution." One by one, the other monarchs gave their verdict. Not all of them cared about human rights. Some simply saw an opportunity to eliminate a troublesome rival. Others wanted to maintain the status quo that benefited them. But the result was unanimous. Guilty. Sentence: death. Constantine screamed curses as he was dragged away, swearing vengeance even as he was taken to face his fate. Aldric didn't watch him go. His eyes stayed on Sera. When the conclave concluded and the other vampires began to depart, Aldric stood and addressed the assembly one final time. "As of tonight, The law of kings regarding Sera Calloway is fulfilled and recognized. She is free to come and go as she pleases, with the full resources of the Northern Territories at her disposal." He paused, then added in a quieter voice, "And I am pleased to announce that Miss Calloway has chosen to remain at Ravencourt as an honored member of my household and, should she permit it, as my consort." Whispers rippled through the crowd. A vampire king taking a human consort wasn't unheard of, but it was rare and carried significant political implications. Morgana caught Sera's eye and winked. The conclave dispersed slowly over the next day as the various vampires returned to their territories. Aldric spent hours in meetings, shoring up alliances and managing the political fallout of Constantine's execution. But he always made time for Sera, stealing moments between obligations to simply be with her. A week after the conclave, life at Ravencourt began to return to normal, or at least the new normal. Sera began her education in earnest, learning about vampire society, history, and politics from Aldric and his advisors. She discovered she had a knack for it, her historian's mind perfectly suited to understanding the complex web of alliances and grudges that defined vampire culture. She also began working with Victoria to reform some of the Northern Territories' policies. Together, they created new protocols for human-vampire interactions, expanded the resources available to humans who'd been victimized by vampires, and established a task force dedicated to hunting down remaining slave markets. It was meaningful work, and Sera found herself thriving in it. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was building something real. Her relationship with Aldric deepened as well. They spent evenings in the library sharing stories and stealing kisses. He taught her about the supernatural world, introduced her to vampire culture, showed her wonders she'd never imagined. She brought him laughter, warmth, connection to the human world he'd been protecting from a distance for so long. One night, 3 months after the conclave, they stood together on the roof of Ravencourt again. The autumn air was cool, and Sera wore one of Aldric's coats wrapped around her shoulders, breathing in the scent of him. "Do you ever regret it?" Aldric asked quietly. "Choosing this life? Staying with me?" Sera turned to him, cupping his face in her hands. "Never, not once. You saved me, Aldric. Not just from that market, but from a life that was too small for who I'm becoming. You gave me purpose, passion, a place where I belong." "You saved me too," he murmured. "From loneliness, from forgetting what it means to feel. You reminded me why I became king in the first place, to protect people, to build something better." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I have something for you." Inside was a ring, a stunning piece with a ruby the color of blood set in intricate silver. "It's a consort's ring," Aldric explained. "In vampire culture, it marks you as mine and me as yours. It's a promise of commitment, protection, partnership. If you wear this, every vampire in the world will know that you're under my protection. Yes, but also that we're equals, that I've chosen you and you've chosen me." Sera's heart swelled. "It's beautiful. So are you, in every possible way." He took the ring from the box. "Sera Calloway, will you be my consort? Will you stay by my side, help me rule, build a life with me, despite all the complications and dangers that come with it?" "Yes," she breathed. "Yes to all of it." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, the metal warm against her skin. Then he kissed her, deep and passionate and full of promise, and Sera felt like she was flying. They stayed on the roof until dawn, talking about the future they would build together. Sera would continue her education and her reform work. Aldric would continue ruling, but with her at his side, advising and supporting. They would face challenges, other vampires who disapproved of their relationship, political threats, the simple difficulty of a human loving someone immortal, but they would face them together. As the sun began to rise, they retreated inside. Aldric led Sera to his private chambers, and she understood what he was offering, not just his protection or his partnership, but all of him, completely and without reservation. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with want but restrained, always giving her the choice. "I'm sure," she said, pulling him down to kiss her. "I've never been more sure of anything." They made love as the sun rose over London, tender and passionate and real. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms in Aldric's massive bed, Sera felt more at peace than she had in her entire life. "I love you," she whispered. "I know it's fast. I know it's complicated, but I do. I love you, Aldric Corvinus." His arms tightened around her, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I love you too, Sera. My unexpected salvation, my impossible gift. I will spend the rest of your life and beyond, if you'll let me turn you when you're ready, proving that love every single day." "Beyond sounds good," she murmured, already drowsy. "I want forever with you." "Then you shall have it." The months that followed were among the happiest of Sera's life. She thrived at Ravencourt, growing into her role as Aldric's consort with grace and confidence. The vampire community gradually accepted her, recognizing that she was more than just a human who'd caught a king's eye. She was a force in her own right, intelligent and compassionate and fierce when necessary. She completed her university degree remotely, with Aldric's resources making it possible to access any text or scholar she needed. Her thesis on vampire-human relations through the centuries was so comprehensive that she was offered a position as a consultant to the Masquerade Commission, the international body that oversaw vampire-human interactions. Aldric, for his part, was transformed by her presence. The grim, duty-bound king softened, finding joy in the small moments, breakfasts together in the conservatory, evenings reading by the fire, stolen kisses in the hallways. His court noticed and approved. A happy king was a just king, and under Aldric's rule, the northern territories flourished. They traveled together, visiting vampire courts across Europe and beyond. Sera met ancient vampires and young ones, learned about different cultures and traditions, and always, she worked to improve conditions for humans living in vampire-dominated areas. The slave markets in the northern territories were completely dismantled within 6 months. Sera's task force hunted down every trafficker, freed every captive, and prosecuted every vampire who'd participated. It was grueling, often heartbreaking work, but it mattered. Lives were saved, futures were restored. A year after the conclave, Aldric threw a ball to celebrate the anniversary of their meeting. Ravencourt was filled with guests, vampires and humans alike, all dressed in their finest. Sera wore a gown of deep red that matched Aldric's eyes, with the consort's ring gleaming on her finger. As they danced together in the ballroom where the conclave had been held, Sera looked around at the life they'd built, at the vampires and humans mingling freely, at Victoria and Elena chatting with vampire nobles, at Morgana holding court in the corner, telling outrageous stories that made even ancient vampires laugh. "What are you thinking?" Aldric asked, spinning her expertly. "I'm thinking about that night in the market. How terrified I was, how hopeless everything seemed." She met his eyes. "And I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you walked through that door, that you saw me and decided I was worth saving." "You were always worth saving. I just happened to be lucky enough to find you." He pulled her closer. "I have a question to ask you." "Another one. You already made me your consort. What more could there be?" His expression turned serious. "The offer still stands, Sera. If you want to become a vampire, if you want true immortality so we never have to face you aging while I stay the same, I will turn you. You would be my equal in every way, power, lifespan, everything. But only if you want it, only if you choose it freely." Sera had thought about this often over the past year. The idea of immortality was daunting, watching the world change, outliving everyone she knew. But then she thought about facing that with Aldric by her side, about having centuries to love him, to build their life together, to make a difference in the world. "Not yet," she said softly, "but someday. When I've lived enough as a human, when I've accomplished the things I want to accomplish in this form, then I'll ask you to turn me, and we'll have forever." Relief and love shone in Aldric's eyes. Someday then. I can wait. I've waited 800 years for you. A few more decades won't kill me." She laughed and rested her head on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. Around them, the party continued, full of light and laughter and life. 5 years later, on a night very much like that one, Sera made her choice. She'd accomplished her goals as a human, earned multiple degrees, reformed vampire-human relations across Europe, written books that changed how both species saw each other. She was ready for the next chapter. Aldric turned her in a private ceremony, with only their closest friends present. The transformation was painful, but brief, and when Sera woke 3 days later with crimson eyes and porcelain skin and strength beyond measure, Aldric was there, holding her hand. "Welcome to immortality," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Welcome to forever." They spent the next century traveling the world, ruling the northern territories with wisdom and compassion, always together. Sera became a legend in her own right, the human who'd been freed from slavery and had risen to become one of the most respected vampires in the world. She never forgot where she came from, and she never stopped fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And through it all, Aldric was by her side, her partner, her lover, her best friend, her king. The vampire who'd seen her in chains and had emptied his vault without hesitation to set her free. The love that had started in darkness and had grown into something brilliant and enduring. A light that would burn for all of eternity. On quiet nights, when they sat together watching the sunset from the safety of Ravencourt's windows, Sera would sometimes think back to that moment in the slave market, to how terrified she'd been, to how close she'd come to losing everything. And then she'd look at Aldric, at the life they'd built, at the love that had saved them both. And she'd smile. Because yes, the beginning had been dark and frightening. But the story they'd written together, the story of a vampire king and the woman he'd freed, who had freed him in return, that story was beautiful. And it was far, far from over. Their love story would echo through the centuries, told and retold among both vampires and humans, as an example of how love could transcend boundaries, how one act of courage and compassion could change everything. Sera and Aldric became the gold standard for vampire-human relations, proof that the two species could not only coexist, but thrive together. They had children, eventually adopted human children who they raised with love and gave the choice to be turned when they came of age. Some chose immortality, others chose to live and die as humans, and Aldric and Sera supported each decision with equal enthusiasm. Their family grew, expanded, became a dynasty of compassion and justice. The northern territories flourished under their joint rule. Slavery was eradicated not just from their lands, but from most of Europe as other territories followed their example. Laws were reformed, protections established, and slowly, painfully, the relationship between vampires and humans evolved into something approaching true equality. And through all of it, the centuries, the changes, the challenges, and triumphs, Aldric and Sera remained constants for each other. On hard days, they were each other's comfort. On joyous days, they celebrated together. They argued sometimes, disagreed on policy or approach, but they never stopped communicating, never stopped choosing each other. 1,000 years after that night in the slave market, they returned to the place where it had all begun. The caverns beneath London had long since been converted into a museum, a memorial to the humans who'd suffered there, and a reminder of the progress that had been made. They stood in front of a plaque that told the story of the Law of Kings, of Aldric's decision to empty his vault, of Sera's testimony that had changed vampire law forever. New visitors didn't recognize them, just another vampire couple visiting the museum, pale and beautiful and timeless. "Do you ever regret it?" Sera asked, echoing Aldric's question from so long ago. "Everything that came from that night, the changes, the challenges, tying yourself to me?" Aldric took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers with the ease of centuries of practice. "Not for a single moment. You were the best decision I ever made, Sera Corvinus. Every good thing in my life, every moment of joy, every reason I have to wake up and face the night, it all traces back to you." Sera leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I love you. For 1,000 years I've loved you, and I'll love you for 1,000 more." "Forever," Aldric agreed, pressing a kiss to her white hair, the same color as his now, marking her as one of his kind. "We have forever, beloved. And I intend to spend every moment of it grateful that I walked into that market and found you." They left the museum hand in hand, walking out into the London night that was theirs to protect and cherish. Behind them, the plaque gleamed in the museum lighting, telling their story to any who cared to read it. On this site, King Aldric Corvinus of the Northern Territories invoked the Law of Kings to free Sera Calloway from slavery. His actions led to the abolition of vampire trafficking across Europe and the reform of human-vampire relations. This museum stands as a testament to the victims of the slave trade and as a celebration of the progress achieved when compassion and justice prevail. May we never forget the darkness of the past, and may we always strive toward the light of a better future. And in that museum, in those words, the truth was preserved, that love had triumphed over cruelty, that one brave decision had changed the world, and that a vampire king and the woman he freed had built something eternal from the ashes of her captivity. Their love story would be told for millennia, a beacon of hope in the darkness, proof that even in the worst circumstances, connection was possible. That choosing compassion over cruelty, love over indifference, could transform not just individual lives, but entire civilizations. Sera and Aldric walked into their future together, hand in hand, heart to heart, forever bound by the love that had started in chains and had become the freest, strongest thing either of them had ever known. And they lived, truly lived, happily ever after.